You're sitting on your couch right now. Maybe you've got the news on in the background. Maybe you're scrolling your phone, doing absolutely nothing wrong. But let me ask you something. What happens tomorrow if your card gets declined? Not because your account is empty, but because the entire banking system is frozen? That is not science fiction. That is not a movie plot. Every single one of the 9 collapse scenarios I'm going to walk you through today has either happened in modern history or is currently unfolding somewhere on this planet right now. The average person has zero plan for any of them. Not a partial plan, not a rough idea. Zero. And that gap between where you are right now and where you need to be is exactly what this video is about. If you want to be part of the small percentage of people who actually think past tomorrow, hit subscribe right now. Drop a comment telling me which of these 9 scenarios scares you the most. Let's get tactical. Let's start with the one that's already happening, and almost nobody is treating seriously. Economic collapse. When most people hear economic collapse, they picture some dramatic stock market crash, ticker symbols going red, guys in suits panicking on TV. That is the Hollywood version. The real version is quieter, slower, and far more devastating. Hyperinflation does not announce itself. It creeps in. In Weimar Germany in the early 1920s, people needed wheelbarrows full of cash to buy a loaf of bread. In Zimbabwe in 2008, inflation hit 89 sextillion%. That is not a typo. Here is what I know with absolute certainty. Fiat currency systems have failed repeatedly throughout history. Every single one. The question is never if, it is when and how fast. Most people's entire survival plan is a savings account denominated in the very currency that could become worthless. When the dollar loses purchasing power faster than you can spend it, your food becomes your savings. Your tools become your currency. Your skills become your net worth. The people who figured that out before the collapse are the ones trading and thriving while everyone else is standing in line waiting for nothing. Let's talk about the second scenario. Grid collapse. The American power grid is a patchwork of aging infrastructure that experts have been warning about for decades. Right now, today, there are transformers in service that are 30, 40, 50 years old. Some of them take over a year to manufacture and replace. There is no stockpile. An electromagnetic pulse, either from a solar event or a high-altitude detonation, could take out the grid across an entire region in a fraction of a second. Within 24 hours, water treatment plants stop. Within 72 hours, most hospitals exhaust backup power. Within a week, the logistics network that keeps store shelves stocked simply ceases to exist. Most people have never thought about what their home looks like without electricity for more than a day. The answer is, it looks like a survival challenge you are completely unprepared for. Your refrigerator becomes a box. Your furnace becomes furniture. Your phone becomes a brick. The third way society breaks down is supply chain collapse, and this one should feel familiar because you literally watched it happen. 2020 showed everyone that the supply chain is not robust. It is not resilient. It is a finely tuned machine that depends on every component working simultaneously across dozens of countries, thousands of ports, and millions of trucks. Pull one piece and the whole thing stutters. Pull 3 pieces and it stops. Here is what most people do not understand about modern just-in-time supply chains. There is no buffer. Grocery stores carry roughly 3 days of inventory. Pharmacies carry about 2 weeks of common medications. Hospitals have roughly 30 days of critical supplies. After that, you are dealing with scarcity and the behavior that comes with it. The people who mocked preppers in 2019 were the same people fighting over toilet paper in 2020. The math does not lie. Redundancy in your personal supply chain is not paranoia. It is pattern recognition. Number 4. Water infrastructure failure. This one is silent until it is catastrophic. The pipes underneath most American cities were built between the 1930s and 1960s. The American Society of Civil Engineers gives United States drinking water infrastructure a grade of C-. Every single day, there are about 600 water main breaks across the country. 600. A major disruption to water treatment, whether from infrastructure failure, cyber attack, or contamination, gives you about 3 days before the average adult starts making catastrophically bad decisions. Not from laziness or stupidity. From dehydration-induced cognitive impairment. You literally cannot think straight. The average American uses roughly 80 to 100 gallons of water per day. Survival requires about 1 gallon per person per day for drinking and basic sanitation. Most people cannot bridge that gap for more than 24 hours without preparation. Know where the water is in your area, not the faucet, the source. Rivers, lakes, retention ponds. Know how to treat it. Know how to move it. Because in a water crisis, the person with filtration capability is not just surviving, they are powerful. Let's talk about political collapse. And I know that sounds abstract, but stay with me. Political collapse does not always look like tanks in the street. Sometimes it looks like a government that slowly loses the ability to perform its basic functions. Courts that cannot enforce rulings. Police departments that cannot respond. Agencies that cannot pay employees. The machinery of civil order quietly grinding to a halt. History shows us that when governmental authority fragments, the vacuum gets filled fast. Sometimes by local organizations, sometimes by militias, sometimes by whoever has the most food, weapons, and followers. The transition period, that gray zone between order and whatever comes next, is where most people face maximum risk. The critical lesson here is that governmental collapse is not a binary event. You do not go from full order to total chaos in a weekend. It is a gradient, and your preparation window is during that gradient, not after. If you are waiting for the official announcement that things have gone bad, you have already missed your window. Number 6. Cyber attack on critical infrastructure. In 2021, hackers shut down the Colonial Pipeline, the pipeline responsible for 45% of fuel supply to the entire East Coast, for 6 days. 6 days. Gas stations ran dry. Panic buying erupted across multiple states. And that was one pipeline hit by ransomware from one group with one objective. Modern critical infrastructure, power, water, gas, transportation, communications, is networked, which means it is vulnerable. Security researchers have been finding exploitable vulnerabilities in industrial control systems for years. Some of those systems are running software so outdated that Microsoft stopped supporting it a decade ago. A coordinated cyber attack targeting multiple systems simultaneously would be a force multiplier for chaos. It would not have to destroy physical infrastructure. It would just have to create enough uncertainty, enough service interruption, to trigger the human behavior cascade that does the real damage. Panic buying, hoarding, social friction, those are the actual weapons. Scenario 7 is the one people want to believe is permanently behind us. Pandemic and biological crisis. The mistake most people made in 2020 was treating it as a once-in-a-lifetime anomaly. It was not. The 20th century alone saw the 1918 flu pandemic, multiple polio outbreaks, HIV, SARS, MERS, and Ebola. Pandemics are not anomalies. They are a recurring feature of civilization. What makes biological scenarios particularly dangerous from a preparedness standpoint is the speed of social breakdown relative to the slow pace of medical response. A novel pathogen does not wait for scientists to develop countermeasures, but rumors, panic, and supply disruption all move faster than science. Every time. Here is the tactical reality. Your house is your quarantine unit. Your stockpile is your supply chain. Your knowledge is your medical system. The people who walked into a pandemic with masks, medications, a month of food, and a plan to reduce exposure were not paranoid. They were right. That is all there is to it. Number 8. Civil unrest and social fragmentation. Let's be clear about what we mean here. We are not talking about protests. We are talking about the conditions that emerge when enough people simultaneously lose faith in institutions, lose economic stability, and lose the belief that tomorrow will be better than today. When those three things combine, the social contract frays fast. The math is brutal. A 10% unemployment rate is considered a crisis. During the Great Depression, unemployment hit 25%, and that was with a far more rural, self-sufficient, community-oriented population. Today's population is urban, interdependent, and approximately 3 paychecks from panic. The baseline fragility is higher than it has ever been in American history. Understanding this scenario means understanding human behavior under scarcity. People do not become monsters overnight, but they do become tribal, short-term focused, and willing to do things they would have considered unthinkable under normal conditions. Your preparation strategy needs to account for human psychology, not just logistics. What this means practically. Your security strategy cannot rely entirely on force or concealment. It has to include community relationships. The neighbors who know you, trust you, and would signal you if something was wrong are part of your defensive system. Build those relationships before you need them, not after. And the ninth scenario, the one that requires no political alignment, no conspiracy theory, no institutional failure at all. Natural disaster cascade. I am talking about what happens when multiple natural events hit in sequence or simultaneously. A major earthquake that fractures water mains and gas lines, followed by fires, followed by flooding from broken levees. A hurricane that knocks out power for a region of 10 million people while a cold front moves in behind it. These are not hypothetical chains. They are documented historical events. FEMA's guidance tells you to have 72 hours of supplies. Here is the actual data from major disaster responses. Government aid typically takes 5 to 7 days to reach affected areas in significant scale after a major event, often longer in rural zones. And that is for single event disasters with a functioning support network. The cascade effect is what kills preparation plans. You prepared for the hurricane. You did not prepare for the gas shortage and civil unrest that followed the hurricane 2 weeks later, when insurance claims are not paid and people are still without power. Every disaster has an echo. The echo is often worse than the event. Now let's talk about the real thread running through all 9 of these scenarios, because it is not the scenarios themselves that get people killed. It is the gap. The gap between how long the average person can survive without external support and how long it actually takes for that support to arrive. Most households have about 3 days of food and water. Most crises take longer than 3 days to resolve. That gap is where everything goes wrong. That is where the unprepared majority runs out of options. The solution is not glamorous and it is not complicated. It is redundancy. Multiple water sources and filtration methods. Food stores calculated in calories per person per day, not just boxes on a shelf. Power alternatives. Communication methods that do not depend on cell towers. Community relationships. Skill sets that do not require a functioning economy to have value. Run the numbers. 1 pound of white rice contains roughly 1,500 calories. A 50-pound bag costs around $25 and can sustain one adult for approximately 30 days at survival-level caloric intake. That is less than $1 a day to add 30 days of food security for one person. The math is simple. The action is simple. 99% of people still will not do it. Here is the dark truth I have to tell you before we close this out. Preparation does not make you invincible. You can do everything right and still draw a bad card. A flood that moves faster than any model predicted. A medical emergency in a grid-down situation. Violence from someone who was better armed and more desperate than you. Luck still matters. Preparation shifts the odds. That is it. It does not rewrite them entirely. What it does is take you out of the 99% who will be completely helpless in the first 72 hours of a major crisis and move you into a different category. Fewer variables outside your control. More options. More time to make better decisions. Better odds. Not guarantees. Better odds. There is also the human element that nobody wants to talk about. Eventually, in any sustained collapse scenario, you will have to make decisions about other people. Who you help, who you cannot help, who poses a threat. There is no right answer to those decisions. There are only trade-offs. Anyone who tells you different is selling you something. What I can tell you is that the people who think through these scenarios in advance, who have mentally rehearsed the decisions, who have built relationships and resources before the crisis, will make better decisions under pressure than people who are discovering the situation in real time. Pre-commitment to a value system and a plan is a force multiplier. Every time. Here is your move. Right now, today, before you close this tab. Pick one scenario from these 9, just one, and ask yourself, what would the first 72 hours of that scenario look like in your specific location, with your specific household and your current resources? If you can answer that question in detail, you are already ahead of 99% of people. If you cannot, and be honest with yourself, then you have just identified your first project, not your second, your first. Open a new tab right now and map the water sources within 5 miles of your location. Find out where your nearest National Guard armory is. Look up the Regional Emergency Management Office for your county. None of this requires money. All of it requires the 30 minutes that 99% of people will spend on something that will not matter when things go sideways. You just sat through a breakdown of 9 ways the society you depend on every single day can fracture. The economics, the infrastructure, the politics, the biology, the physics of disaster. None of these are theories. All of them are documented patterns with real historical precedent and zero reason to believe they have permanently stopped recurring. The only question left is whether you are going to be the person who already knew this was possible, or the person who is shocked when it finally happens. 1% of people think about this. 0.1% of people act on it. Subscribe if you are in that last group. Drop a comment with the scenario that concerns you most and why. I read everyone. Class dismissed.